I hope you're doing well. We talk often about faithful men, and the question could be asked, well, what makes a faithful man? What makes a good man by the Bible's perspective, or God's perspective, I should say? Well, number one, a faithful man should have faith. Quite obviously, as the name suggests, Hebrews chapter 11 verse 6 tells us, and without faith it is impossible to please him, for whoever would draw near to God must believe that he exists, or that he is, and that he is a rewarder of those who diligently seek him. So a faithful man, starting off, must have faith. We see that a faithful man must have courage. 1 Corinthians chapter 16 and verse 13 would tell us this: be watchful, stand firm in the faith, act like a man, be strong. The idea of acting like a man, when you go back to Greek society and their literature, things like that, is a courageous man, all right? A good man, someone with virtue, someone with courage. And that's what Paul's talking about here. He says, be watchful, stand firm in the faith, be courageous, be strong. Going further than that, we see that a faithful man obviously must be a pure man. 1 Timothy chapter 4 verse 12 says this: let no one despise your youth, but set an example for the believers in speech, in conduct, in love, in faith, and listen to this, in purity. Going back to 1 Timothy chapter 2, one page over, 1 Timothy chapter 2 and verse 8 would tell us, I desire then that in every place the men should pray, lifting holy hands without anger or quarreling. A faithful man must be a man of prayer. The Bible also tells us, pray without ceasing. A faithful man must have understanding. Rightfully so. If you're going to have faith, you should have an understanding of what it is that you believe. 1 Corinthians chapter 14. Again, 1 Corinthians chapter 14 and verse 20 tells us, brothers, do not be children in your thinking. Don't be infants. Don't be unaware of what you're talking about or what you believe. He says, be infants in evil, but in your thinking be mature. He says, don't be evil. He says, do as little of it as you can. But in your thinking, in your knowledge, in your understanding, he says, be mature. Be mature. A faithful man must have humility. In Acts chapter 10 and verse 26, and really all throughout the book of Acts, we see the example set for humility. In Acts chapter 10, Cornelius falls down before Peter to worship him because an angel had spoken to Cornelius. Peter came to him, and anyway, Cornelius falls down before him. And Peter gets him up out of the floor. It says he lifts him up and says to him, stand up, I myself am also a man. I myself am also a man. He says that because that's what humility is. And we see in the book of Acts later in chapter 12 the importance, with Herod's example, of taking the credit for God. We see the importance of not doing that. Well, Herod died because of it. All right, a faithful man must be one of humility. Now, a faithful man must also be one of Scripture. 1 Timothy chapter 4, going back there, verse 16, he says, keep a close watch on yourself and on the teaching. Persist in this, for by doing so you will save yourself and many others. Keep a close watch on yourself, he says, and on the teaching. Persist in these things, and by doing so you will save yourself and also many others. Not only that, but going over to 2 Timothy chapter 2 and verse 15, we see the idea of rightly dividing or rightly handling the word of truth. So a faithful person, I say man just out of habit, but a faithful person must be one of, obviously, faith, one of purity, one of prayer, one of understanding, one of humility, and one of Scripture. If you have these things, then, dear friend, you are faithful. I want to thank you for watching, and I'd also like to invite you to a gospel meeting April the 23rd through the 26th, 2023. In the description of this video, you will find a link to more information on that, who's speaking, what times, and where our address is if you'd like to come see us. If you don't have the chance to make that drive, or you're busy on a certain night and you just can't make it, we will record those services and they will be posted. They'll be put in a playlist, and I'll put a link up to that too once all those videos are up. Thank you again for watching.